Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Coralville Library and the Johnson County Task Force on Aging and Disabilities Forum. We have four great candidates here for State Senate, looking to replace Bob Dvorsky, who's been in this role for a very long time. I am going to be the one that's picking up cards. If you are listening to this forum and you think, oh my gosh, they didn't ask a question and I want to make sure that I get an answer to this, raise your hand, I'll bring you a card, or you can pop out of your chair and go over to the table over there and grab a card and a pen. Then if you hold it up, I will pick it up and get it to these gentlemen so that they can incorporate it. Pardon? And sorry, these gentlemen over here. Yes, no.
That's mine.
Janice is the lady in the room. Yes, she is. So Bob Welsh is going to be the Master of Ceremonies today. He's been very involved in the Task Force on Aging for many, many, many years before they'd even existed. And so I'm going to turn this over to him. Again, raise your hand if you have a card and a question. Thanks, Bob.
State Senate District 37 is the most contested primary in the state of Iowa. There are four candidates. As they arrived, they drew cards, and that determined the order in which they are seated. Did not do it alphabetically or anything else. We're privileged to have as our moderator today Lyle Muller. Lyle is the executive director and editor of the Iowa Center for Public Affairs Journalism, Iowa Watch. Lyle, as many of you know, is a longtime Iowa journalist and is a North Liberty resident. And I think the candidates' names you have in front of you, and as I say, the order in which they will answer Lyle's questions are dictated by the draw. So, Lyle, let me hand you this microphone.
All right. I'm going to do this. All right, well, thank you, Bob, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you, candidates, for coming. The Senate District 37 covers eastern Johnson County and all of Cedar County with a population of about 62,650 people. And you may be wondering, if it covers all of Cedar County, why have this in Coralville? And the answer is it's a really good drive for our candidates, who are Eric Dirth of Coralville, Wahls of Coralville, Janice Weiner of Iowa City, and Imad Youssif of Coralville. And what we've done is, Bob explained that they drew a number, and that's why they're sitting in the order they're in. The way we're going to do this is we're going to ask questions. They'll get a minute to answer each question. If they're completing a thought, they'll get to finish that. If they feel they have more to talk about because of the complexity of the issue or some points to be made, we might give them another chance to go down the row and answer that. They will have a couple of minutes at the end to make closing statements, when they will give remarks about the things they felt they wanted to say but didn't get to say, or points they want to make. We do have a timekeeper, so candidates, right over here, you'll see this is high-grade electronic technology. We like to call these paper text. And so you'll get a note when there's 15 seconds left, and then you'll get a word to stop when it's time to stop. The way we'll do this is we're going to go in order, starting with 1, 2, 3, 4, but then the next time we ask questions, 2, 3, 4, 1. That way we have a little bit of variety to do that. So I want to start right off the bat, and Eric, you get to start by telling us why you believe you're the most qualified for the job. And each of you, we want you to just give us that summary. Why are you the most qualified to do the job?
Yeah. Well, thanks. And I just would like to say thanks to the Task Force on Aging for hosting this event today, and thanks to Bob, and thanks to Lyle, and for the candidates. It's very exciting to be here this morning to talk about the issues. The reason I believe I'm the most qualified for the position is because a senator needs to have two things. One, the senator needs to be connected to the community that it represents. Two, the senator needs to have the experience and expertise to take to Des Moines. Now, I grew up in a small town just south of Johnson County on a gravel road. We had 0 stoplights and 2 gas stations. And I learned about the unique benefits of living in a small town and also the unique challenges. I've also lived in Iowa City, and I call Coralville now my home. And I understand the unique challenges facing more rural or more urban Iowa populations. So I believe I have the connection to the community. Second, I have the legal education. To take to Des Moines. When I talk about legal education, that means experience in a judicial, legislative, and executive capacity. I've worked at the Iowa Court of Appeals interpreting laws. I worked at the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, Iowa Department of Agriculture.
And I'm going to interrupt you there because that minute goes pretty fast.
I apologize.
Well,
Can I just finish that thought?
Go ahead.
So I've worked in the judicial and legislative and executive capacity, and I believe my skill set with Iowa laws uniquely provide me the skill set that what we need in Des Moines. Thank you.
Imad?
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight, for being here this afternoon. My name is Imad Youssif, as you see over here. And the way that I see that I'm most qualified because I have the experience, I have the knowledge. I have 2 doctorate degrees, the first one in finance and the second one in accounting. I'm an educator, I'm an academic researcher. I worked for 25 years in business. I have a great experience. I work with United Nations and also I work with BANAF. This is the biggest branch of African Organization Unity. I work in councils. I work for the bank's board of directors, and I have a lot of experience. And I know a lot of how you need. What I look for the Senate as it is. You know, you need to somebody when he go over there, he know what he talking about. What he has the skills, you know, that when he provide any proposals, he need to provide the documentation that support what he think. And you need somebody that has the knowledge, has the experience, have the capabilities, you know, that to listen and to check everybody and go everywhere and to listen to everybody to know their concerns, their idea. I have the passion to do that.
Okay, and that minute, too, went fast for you. We'll have plenty of time, trust me, to talk about some of these issues and some of these qualifications. Zach?
Thank you very much, Lyle, and good afternoon to everybody. It's great to be here with all of you in person and those of you watching at home on TV. My name is Zach Wahls, and I'm running to succeed Senator Bob Dvorsky for Senate District 37. The question is, why are we the most qualified candidate? And I believe that I'm the most qualified candidate because I'm somebody who has experience actually making change and being an effective advocate here in Iowa. Growing up with lesbian parents in our state, I learned at an early age what it feels like to be left behind and left out, and I know that a lot of people feel that way right now. Our healthcare system is broken, our schools are underfunded, workers' rights are under assault, senior services are being cut. I'm somebody who stood up and who's fought for families like mine successfully, who protected marriage equality here in Iowa. And then I went on to co-found and lead the campaign to overturn the Boy Scouts of America's decades-old ban on gay leaders and members. We got that done. It was very tough, but we were able to do it. The people of this community need somebody who knows what it's like to organize people, get together, actually make change happen. That's what I'm looking forward to doing as your next state senator, and that's why I believe I'm the most qualified candidate. Thank you.
Janice?
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Janice Weiner, and I too am running for Senate District 37. I believe that I am the most qualified candidate in the field because I have both the professional and the personal experience that can allow me to connect with Iowans and to move your issues forward. I spent 26 years building relationships in the U.S. Foreign Service across political parties, solving problems in Turkey, for example, helping victims who are suffering from human rights violations. On the personal side, I have run a household, I have raised 2 children, and I have also dealt with elder care issues of both my parents. To go back to Eric's issues, I have a legal education. I am very deeply grounded in this community. I am a member of the Board of Shelter House and of our local synagogue. I work with free lunch, and I work with a lot of various issues that are near and dear to this community, and I would very much appreciate being able to continue that work in Des Moines.
Last week, Governor Reynolds signed a couple of bills expanding mental health care services in Iowa and also authorizing programs for mental health care treatment in schools, K through 12 schools in Iowa. What I want to ask is, will those bills do enough? And Imad, we'll start with you.
I don't think it did enough, because when the governor, she take over, she closed 4 mental institutions. And we have a lot of, we need to focus on mental issues. We have a lot of people, you know, that they sufferings, they didn't get the treatment, they didn't get the health care that they should have. And also, I'm looking for to add mental health in the schools, that to cope with the students' hard and difficulties with the academic challenge. If I elected, if I go over there, then I have simple and direct plans. We need fund for the mental people with mental illness, and we need more mental institutions. We need more hospitals. We need anyone. I believe everyone over here, if not directly, he has somebody suffering from mental illness. Mental illness people, they need to be treated very carefully. They need to get their medicine. They need to get where doctors, providers that provide the health that they should have it.
It's called time, and we can get back to that if there are more thoughts from the candidates. Zach?
Mental health care is an issue that I think most Iowans are affected by either directly or they have a family or friend who's experienced the challenges of navigating Iowa's mental health system. I was glad to see there were finally Democrats and Republicans coming together to address the mental health system, but I'm concerned because we've been here before. There have been various reorganizations that have been put forward by the legislature, signed by various governors. The real question is going to be whether or not we're actually able to fund the reorganization that's happened. Republicans have done their very best to prevent the various counties and regions from actually spending these funds, and it looks like that they're going to continue to try to make that harder to do. So I think the real question is going to be whether or not we're able to get the funding. I know that there are people in our community. I've had the chance to speak with parents who have children who have been trying to navigate the system, and these are people who are white-collar professionals, have all the energy, the resources in the world, and they're still struggling to navigate the system. Say nothing of somebody who's like a single mom with 2 kids or 2 jobs. It's very difficult to do, and so the system is clearly in need of reform, and we have to make sure it's fully funded as we're reforming the system.
Janice?
I was very happy to see the complex mental health needs bill pass. It was a wonderful effort by both parties to actually reach across the aisle and accomplish something that is much needed for this state, which is way at the back of the pack. It is a start, and it provides different levels of care that didn't exist before. Johnson County is really out in front of this with the Access Center that is planned, and I hope that other areas of the state and regions can use that as something of a model to see how it works, how well it works as they proceed with theirs. I do also believe that there will be challenges with funding going forward. We don't know we don't know where the funding will come from, and we don't know exactly how that's going to proceed. There's certain funding in the counties now that people are talking about turning back to the state. And finally, I would say, since I'm almost at time, that the one issue it did not address is children with complex mental health needs. They need special educational schools, and they need special care, and none of that is addressed or funded.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up the baton where Janice left off. When you talk to students or you talk to families of students, you hear how long it takes to get any 504 or individual plan for students in schools. So if a student wants to be diagnosed or needs to have a check to see if to get diagnosed for ADHD, ADD, or any other type of a learning challenge, a learning disability, it can take up to 10 months for that to get that in place in your school district. And if you call right now and see what the wait time is to see a public health professional, though it's up to 3 months, and that's just unacceptable. I mean, the idea here is, and I think it's important that we need to give credit where credit due. The critical access centers that are going to be located around the state are incredibly important. It's a step in the right direction, but we still have a really long way to go. And at the end of the day, it should not be the sheriff's department, and it should not be the first responders, it should not be the emergency room personnel who are doing the mental health care in our state. We should be training our mental health professionals, so making sure that our mental health professionals have the skill set to make sure that everyone who needs mental health care gets their mental health care.
Well, let's talk about things that you all four think could be done, and that could continue perhaps in the discussion, Imad, that I cut you off on. But where would funding come from, and what specifically would you like to see done that hasn't been done? And you're only going to get a minute to talk about it, but it's an important type of issue, I think, in the state. Go ahead.
Starting with me?
No, with Imad.
What is that? Sorry.
The question would be, what then should be done that hasn't been done in this bill, and where would the resources come from?
Yeah, that is, there's two areas. The mental health issues, should be federal and state. The federals, that any fund they coming to the state for the mental health, just should be used for that area. I see the people in Des Moines, they cut all the fundings and use it for other things. And that is not acceptable. And I believe that everybody, community, state, federal, they should be gathered together and create the fund that help for the mental issues or mental health.
Zach, anything to add?
Well, I think that it sounds like we all agree that the bill is a step in the right direction. The big question is going to be where the funding should come from. I do think that if we want to have a clear, positive direction for our mental health system, we're going to have to bring together experts into some kind of blue ribbon commission that can have a good understanding of how things got so bad. As of last year, Iowa ranked 49th in the country in terms of beds, public health beds per capita. That was a direct result of closing facilities, of chronic underfunding of our system. And so I think having a clear understanding of how we got to where we are and where we should go, that would be a good first step in the right direction. And then in terms of the funding, something that I think is important for folks to understand is that there is a significant amount of money that is on the balance sheets of the various regions that are currently responsible for delivering a lot of these mental health services in our state. What's important is making sure that we're able to actually spend those monies. There are some Republicans who are trying to get these regions to get that money off of their balance sheets. In fact, I think that we should be spending it in part on these critical access centers and making sure that we have the beds that are needed.
Janice?
I would like to come back to the focus on children. Because if we start with children, if we start with people in the schools, if we start with special therapeutic schools that exist in a couple of places in the state, such as Council Bluffs, that can really help children from a fairly young age, the problems that we confront and the more seriously mentally ill confront as they age will be much less, and they will cost us less, and all these young people will have been treated from a fairly early age and will not have to face the problems that they are today to a large extent. I also believe that one of the big challenges, not necessarily in this area, but throughout most of the state, is number of mental health professionals available. If you try and get an appointment, it is often takes months. And even when I came here several years ago, it took a couple of months. So I cannot imagine what it's like if you're out in the further areas of the state. And finally, I'd add, I think we also need to care for the people in the rural areas, particularly some of our farmers who are enormously under stress.
Eric, go ahead.
Yep, I think we hit on both the issues, budget and healthcare professionals. The budget, and we're going to continue to be facing this. I bet we face this question throughout the entire afternoon. We're going to be talking about the budget. And we have to make sure that we're providing the proper funding, and I think we can go into a long conversation about how we can fix our budget and make sure that we're funding and investing right here in Iowa. But I want to talk briefly about how we can develop mental health care professionals, because that's incredibly important. We have a flagship university right here that produces some fantastic mental health care professionals. finding opportunities for them to work for free, because that's what they're doing right now. As they're training, they're looking for opportunities in Iowa communities to develop their skill set and develop as trained professionals. I have a good friend who is a psychology PhD. He really wanted to spend time at Oakdale and work and help with corrections, help with people with mental health challenges at Oakdale. Unfortunately, they don't have a PhD there who is capable to take him on. So we're turning away high caliber students who could get valuable experience, valuable training, and help and provide some of this mental health care assistance that we need.
Well, let's talk about the budget. The legislature cut $35.5 million from spending from this year's budget, and you mentioned the University of Iowa. The University of Iowa and Iowa State bore the brunt of $11 million of that. And knowing that you're near the campus of the University of Iowa, you may correct us if we're assuming wrong that you thought the University of Iowa should not have borne that brunt of that. But what I really want to know is how should the state handle budget shortfalls like that, including this one, but even looking forward? And Zach, you get to start us.
Sure. Well, as a proud graduate of the University of Iowa, I was really disappointed to see the cuts that were made to the Board of Regents system that are going to deeply affect our community. And when it comes to our state budget and the taxes that are being cut by Republicans, I think the core issue is that Republicans have a very different idea for the future of our state. For a very long time, Iowa has been defined with this idea that we are all in it together, that we all do better when we all do better. And unfortunately, Republicans have a view of the future that is very much kind of in every man or woman for him or herself, and that takes this view that government doesn't have any role. So they've tried to cut taxes to the bone, and as a result, we have to cut services, we have to cut funding from schools, our mental health system has to shut down these institutions. And so I think that we absolutely have to go back through, we have to reevaluate every single one of these tax credits, these tax expenditures, and we have to come back to a shared vision for the future of our state that really does prize every single Iowan, and it gets away from this idea that it's every person for him or herself.
Janice?
When I heard about the budget cuts for the University of Iowa and for Iowa State, I thought, how can they possibly absorb that magnitude of cut in the span of 2 to 3 months? That's simply not possible. And it goes back, I believe, to very poor budgeting and very poor estimating. I think we need to take a good look at the estimating process and find out how we can improve that so that we don't end up saying that we're going to get a certain amount in our budget and then we all of a sudden find we have an enormous shortfall. But more to the point, we must take care of our most vulnerable citizens, where our priorities have been skewed. We've been giving away large amounts of tax money and tax credits for large corporations coming in. We've been giving away large amounts of money to tax credits, and we haven't been taking care of the most vulnerable. And that includes the elderly. This is a forum put on by the Johnson County Task Force on Aging, and we have really been, to a large extent, ignoring our elderly along with many other populations.
Eric?
We fixed our budget by tax reform and growing our economy. Our taxes right now definitely are in need of reform. I will grant the current legislature that. But we should not be cutting taxes for the wealthy few. We should be making sure that our tax dollars are going to invest right here in this community. We need to be scrutinizing every tax giveaway, every corporate tax giveaway, every tax credit, because that money should not be going to out-of-state shareholders. That needs to be investing in our mental health care, in our education, in our infrastructure. That we need those tax dollars here. So I don't know why we're talking about additional tax cuts right now when we're already like failing in all these different areas. So tax is important. Also, we need to continue to think about how we're going to grow our economy and how we're going to attract businesses modern businesses to come set up in our state. We do that by making sure we have a highly skilled workforce, make sure that we have high quality education, we make sure that we have diverse communities that are going to be well supported, and we do that also by making sure we have a clean environment where businesses want to come and people want to raise their families here. Cleaning up our environment is another way that we can attract good business to our state and help grow our economy.
Imad?
Truck businesses to come to Iowa, I believe they come for one reason, to upgrade the skills, to open jobs for Iowans, but I didn't get it. Last year, Rockwell Collins, they generated $5.6 billion and they paid zero for taxes. And also the governor rewarded them and gave them $14 million. For what? And now they're cutting budget from University of Iowa. This is the biggest research university in the United States. They need to be protected, and I don't like to see tuition go up for the students. This is one of the results of their decisions. The system, they need to be rebuilt. We need to look and examine the system very carefully. The system, they need to look for the target, priorities, education, health, and many other things that. All right.
But let's shift to K through 12 funding, as long as we're talking about educational spending. What would be a proper level of support for K through 12 spending? And tell us why you think that way. Janice, you start.
K through 12 is the bedrock of our society here. Public education has always been Iowa's calling card. We have underfunded public education for at least 7 of the last 8 years. We have not even come close to meeting the rate of inflation. We need at least to properly fund public schools here, they need an annual increase of at least 4%. And that's really the minimum. Technology is changing, and various other things need to be improved. They have the save penny sales tax that can be used for buildings, but we must fund this, because once you have underfunded for that many years, we're dealing with a deficit. And teachers and others have made do. They pulled money out of their own pockets and bought supplies, but we're really coming to the end of where that can work. And if we don't fund that, how will families decide to come here and stay because of the education system?
Eric.
So education is absolutely vital, just as Janice said. My parents have been in public education for a combined 50 years. I grew up with a mother as a teacher and a father as a middle school principal. I'm a proud product of public schools, both from K-12 and also graduating from the University of Iowa. When we talk about K-12 funding, 1% increase is what we saw this past year, and that is absolutely not enough. We need to be attracting young teachers to the profession, making sure that teachers, as they approach retirement age, feel comfortable with their IPERs. We need to be making sure that teachers feel confident and comfortable and well respected in this profession. So when we talk about the budget, we need to make sure that we are funding education appropriately, and that is well above 1%.
Imad.
Well, when we're talking about education, we're talking about future. When we're looking for 6 to 12, that means we're building new generation that they're going to be educated, they're going to have a good job, they're going to have a decent life. This is the biggest invest that we need, all of us, to put our hands together and push the people in Des Moines to invest in public schools. Public schools, we have staff over there. We have teachers. Teachers, they need to have well-paid. They need to have a decent life. We don't like teachers to be suffering. And when we're going, cost of living in Iowa is going outpacing the gross income. How the teachers, that they're gonna provide education, well education, and they don't have enough income. They suffering, that we need to invest in public schools. Public schools, they need to be restructured. We need to have the school to be have all the equipments that they're looking for. They need.
Yeah, it's called time. Thank you, Zach.
I think that we need to be at least 4% per year for our allowable growth. I think that we may even need a few years above that in order to catch up for the underfunding that we've had for the last several years. As somebody who grew up in the Iowa City Community School District, I've had the opportunity to meet with teachers, principals, administrators. Everything that I've heard from them suggests that 4% is what we're going to need in order to make sure that we're making those very important investments. In the conversations that I've had out in Cedar County, it's exceptionally important that we extend the Save Penny, which is currently on the chopping block. It's very important, especially in our small towns, that we're able to have that money to bond against in the future. And one of the most important things when it comes to education, and in terms of what's appropriate, I kind of can't believe that I have to say this, but I really strongly oppose the arming of teachers in our classrooms. We should be making investments in our children with money. We should not be arming teachers with handguns. It doesn't make any sense.
I have a few more questions. Actually, I have quite a few, but but I want to remind you that we will take questions from the audience. So if you do have a question, put it on a card, hold your hand up so that it can be collected, and we can ask that as the forum continues. You mentioned arming teachers. Actually, there is a move for right to own guns as a constitutional amendment in the state of Iowa. I'd like to know your views on that. Do we need an amendment for a right to own guns, and then explain why or why not? Eric, you go first.
Lyle, I'm so happy you asked this question because this is incredibly important. So this already passed this term's legislature, and what happens is one of us will get a vote on it next term. If we vote on this, it'll go to the voters, and it will become a constitutional amendment. And what we're hearing them say is that this is just codifying our federal constitutional right. That is wrong. That is straight up wrong. What this does is prevents any common sense gun restriction that we would like to see. So if we think that people of a certain age should not be able to own a firearm, that's gone with this new constitutional amendment. If we think that a state fair should be a place where there's no guns, gone. If we think that maybe Kinnick Stadium should be a safe place without weapons, nope, gone too. This is infuriating because it's just a blatant lie about the law. What we hear with the federal Constitution, that D.C. v. Heller granted us a constitutional right, a fundamental constitutional right to bear arms anywhere. That is also false. When people say this to you, that is false. What that decision means is that we're able to have a gun in our home to protect ourselves. That's all that decision means. So if you hear somebody say, no, this is my constitutional right to bear arms, that is wrong. Tell them it's wrong and say, this is serious. This is guns in our schools. This is guns everywhere. We need common sense gun restrictions, and all this constitutional amendment does is move us in the complete wrong direction.
Imad?
You see that one people, they talking about constitutions. Constitutions, you know that they put two levels in balance. Your right and my right. This is all about, the Constitution all about. And you have a right to have a gun. But there's certain places you cannot go and have a gun, go to the school with the gun. You have no right to take my life. We need to have very strong reform to prevent everybody. And also we need to check everybody apply for the gun permit carefully and seriously. We cannot, because of the Constitution, anyone go over there and apply for gun permit. He's 21 years old or whatever the age is, and we give him permit. We need to check his mental illness. We need to check his background. We need to be very carefully about who have guns in his hand. Yes, you have a right to have a gun to protect yourself, to protect your family, but you have no right to go over there and commit crimes. That we need to, all of us, to stand against it. We need to have very restrictions, and we need to have reform for that. Sorry.
Zach?
I would strongly oppose changing the Iowa Constitution. The U.S. Constitution does, I think, a pretty clear job in terms of protecting the Second Amendment and laying that out in terms of gun ownership rights. I grew up using rifles, shotguns, revolvers, so I feel comfortable around firearms. But when I have conversations with people, especially after what happened in Parkland, I absolutely think that we cannot continue to go on living like this. There have to be common sense reforms that are constitutional that we can put into place. I would support expanding waiting periods, and when it comes to purchasing handguns in our state, we currently have a 3-day waiting period. I think that could be longer. When it comes to registration of handguns, there are several states that have handgun registrations. We could have that in Iowa. And we also currently have a permitting process for the acquisition of handguns. We could do that for long guns as well. I think there are a lot of common sense things that we can do to make it more difficult for people who should not have firearms to obtain them, and we can do that. And we should not be amending the Iowa Constitution to enshrine a right that would make that kind of reform harder.
Janice?
I don't want to see the Iowa Constitution amended. We have enough issues with the Second Amendment as it stands. It does, as Eric stated, give us the right to have a gun in our house under D.C. v. Heller. It does not do an enormous amount more, as many people would like to believe. I have been named a candidate of distinction by Moms for Gun Sense. That's because I believe strongly in gun safety. I believe that people should be allowed to own guns, but they need to take proper care of them. My dad was a pheasant hunter. I went out in the fields with him, but he always believed in locking the gun up and keeping the ammunition separate. I don't believe that anyone needs weapons of war in their hands, and I don't believe that anyone needs large capacity magazines in their hands. I believe that we should have universal background checks. And I honestly believe that people who have a real history of violence should also not be allowed to own weapons. But we have so many law-abiding gun owners here. I see no reason why any of this would need affect them.
I want to ask a question from the audience. Is there an issue on which your position distinguishes you from the other three contenders? And if so, what is it? Imad, you get to go first on this one.
Okay. Well, my platform for running for the state senate, the first thing that I'm looking for, I would like to see invest in public schools. And I would like to see mental health adding to the school programs to help the student to cope with difficulties with academic challenge. And the second thing that I need to be mental health focused on. The third thing that I need to see universal health care. What I mean by universal health care, I need anyone get health service. I need equity for everyone when he get the service health. I need quality. Anyone go over there to get and receive health care, they need to get it with high quality. And I need everyone get health services to be protected from financial harm. I don't like anyone to go over there to get services and then he get with huge bill that put his house and his family in jeopardy and in high risk.
And I'll get to you, Zach, but I want to do a follow-up, and I'm going to use that privilege occasionally. How does that distinguish you from the other three on the panel?
The thing that I see that I'm very suitable or I'm very best candidate because I have the educations, I have the experience, and I have the knowledge, and I have the passion to stand and to fight for the people and to be the voice for the people that for their ideas and concern. I have long 25 years experience in business. I have 25 years experience with international institutions. I'm a board of directors for many international corporations. I'm advisors for and consultant for many of big corporations worldwide. And I work and serve in my community. Even here in Iowa City, I'm serving my Sudanese community and trying to help their problems and listen carefully for them, for problems with education, with Department of Human Services, with the immigrations.
And for brevity's sake, I just want to make sure everyone else gets the time as well. Okay. Zach, same question. An issue in which your position distinguishes you from your other three colleagues up here on the panel?
Well, even though it may feel like it, we have not actually talked about all of the issues yet. So I think there may still be some issues where there may be some disagreement. But I do think it sounded like there may be a difference of opinion when it comes to why Iowa is in the position we are with the budget. I don't think that we are currently here because of poor estimation or because we need more tax reform. I think that we are currently in the position we are in because the 2013 tax reform for property taxes left a huge hole in the budget. We have the backfill coming up now that is on the chopping block. For those of you who are not necessarily policy wonks, essentially when the policy reform happened in 2013, the state made a promise to municipalities that they were going to backfill the loss in property tax revenue and counties as well. And one of the things that's very important to understand is that they are now, the Senate and House Republicans are saying that they are potentially going to be phasing out the backfill. And so as a result, that was a promise that was made. That is a promise that is not kept. And that is why we are currently in the position that we are in. The tax reform, frankly, already happened and it didn't work. So I think that we need to be ready to roll that back. And we have to re-examine every single one of those tax credits and those tax expenditures that are creating a real problem with our budget.
Janice?
To be clear, I don't believe that estimating is the only problem with our tax system. I also understand that it started back in 2013 and perhaps before. The fact that a promise is made and legislated, and now the Republicans want to roll it back, says to me that if going forward, if they're going to roll back the backfill promise, that they need to allow localities to reinstate the commercial property tax at equal measure to how they roll it back, because that property tax rollback itself has not brought the benefits that they claimed it would. One of the things that we really need to focus on that I think some of these monies can help with, and that I do focus on in my platform, is economic development that fits each town and city. It can't be just for Des Moines or for the big cities. It has to be for Tipton and West Branch and Mechanicsville and Loudoun and every town and city. And it really needs to be hooked up in public-private partnerships with our community colleges as a feeder.
Eric?
Full-scale criminal justice reform. Our criminal justice system in our state is an embarrassment right now. The racial inequality in our prison system, 3% of our African-American, 3% of our population is African-American in our state. 25% of those incarcerated in our state are African-American. That is absolutely embarrassing. So we need full-scale criminal justice reform, and this is on all ends. So first, we need to change how we deal with juveniles and how we deal with juvenile justice. We need to reform the system. There should be no such thing as a mandatory or a life without the possibility of parole for a juvenile. What we understand now with juveniles is that brain development doesn't complete until around 25. So what we hear is, why are we incarcerating people for their entire lives for a wrong decision they made when they're 16 or 17? So that needs to change immediately. Also, we are one of 3 states in this country that does not allow felons the right to vote after they've served their time. That is a complete disenfranchisement, and that's 8 or 9% of our population, that's 8 or 9% of African Americans who are unable to vote because of that criminal record. So we talk about adequate representation in our government. It all comes to full-scale criminal justice reform, and that's what we need.
All right, our next question from the audience. How do you feel about the elimination of the property tax backfill to municipal governments? And this dates back to the promise that was made with the elimination of business property taxes. What would your solution be? Zach, you get to go first.
I promise I didn't read that card before my previous answer, although I appreciate whoever it was who submitted that. Obviously, I think we probably do all agree that that is a promise that was made and that it is a promise that should be kept. Cities, counties depend on that backfill. They depended on those revenues. And if that promise is broken, the reality is that your property taxes will go up because there are services that have to be delivered. Here in Johnson County, we decide that we are willing to pay a little bit more and make those investments. And so if that money isn't coming from the state, it will come from the county or from the cities. And so, at the end of the day, I think this speaks to the bigger problem that Republicans have and I don't want to sound like a broken record blaming Republicans, but the reality is this was a promise that was made by the Iowa General Assembly, and this is a promise that Iowa Republicans are about to break.
Janice?
I spoke to it before briefly, but I would like to point out that it's also part of a cycle. It's a cycle where the legislature decides, largely the Republicans in the legislature, let's cut the taxes and deprive the local level of the taxes that they were getting in order to provide services. We, however, will make you whole again. And then they continue to cut and use money for other purposes at the state level, including funding large businesses and other cuts. And all of a sudden they find themselves short and they say, sorry, we can't afford to pay your backfill anymore, so you're going to have to make do. So I see this as a cycle that's happened not just with local funding. I see it as a cycle that's happened with funding DHS, with funding all the different entities in the state so that they can no longer provide the services they need to, including, for example, the committee, the organization that is supposed to help aging Iowans. And I would really like to get to that eventually, since we are with the Task Force for Aging, the problems that are confronting aging Iowans.
Eric?
All that happens when we quit, when we are slowly declining this backfill money, is our property taxes are going to go up. And all that's happening for us as citizens is we're just going to be paying taxes to somebody else. And so really we do have to look back and see that this happened because we gave a commercial property tax break. We thought that commercial property would be we would attract more commercial property if we gave tax breaks, and now we're paying the costs for it. I mean, that's where I think so Zach was right in talking about maybe one of the differences we have, because that is not just the sole problem with our budget. We have many, many problems with our budget, and this backfill is just part of a much larger picture. And that larger picture is that money is leaving our state. Money is not going to the Iowans who need who deserve this to grow Iowa. The money is leaving our state. It's going to special interests, the powerful few. It is not staying here. So this backfill is just a symptom of a much larger problem. I mean, this is one area that we're seeing the legislature pull funds from, but they're pulling funds from everywhere. We see it across the board with budget cuts. And so this is just another example of the failings we're having with our budget right now.
Well, and as a follow-up then to some of the comments that were made, and this is a question from the audience, how would you reach out to fellow senators who are from more conservative districts to obtain their votes? Janice?
We need to start talking to senators from more conservatives. I'm sorry, did Imad have a chance to answer this question?
Oh, that's fine, yeah. Don't
Oh,
worry.
you know what? He did not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't worry.
Thank you so much for doing that. Imad, I'm so sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, that's fine, okay.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I
All right.
will.
All right.
I will
And
just
accept
go
my
for-
apology,
go for
please.
it. No, that's fine, cutting taxes, that is always having through the Republicans. And they working by changing hats. Whenever they found themselves, that they need money, then they cut it from one area and put it in another area. Backfield, and commercial taxes, and also giving money for the big corporations. And I give you before examples for the Rockwell Collins. And when they get back the $14 million, what they did, they take all the high-paid jobs and shift it to Florida. That's what we need to stand up and to tell people in Des Moines they need to stop, and they need to stop what they promise. Cutting taxes is not solving the problems. The problem is there's a broken system. We need to fix the system. How we need to fix the system? That when you go over there to vote and select the right person, when he go to Des Moines, he know how to fight to fix the system. We need to change our mentalities about how we vote and how we select our peoples. We don't need public speakers. We need people, they have the knowledge, the experience, and they know how to go over there and to speak in your behalf, on behalf of each and every one of you. They need to go over there to sit with each and anyone in each county and listen to their concern and problems. This is what all Democrats, they need to change their behaviors, with their psychological behaviors. Now, I need just to finish this. Always we cry why Republican, they control the government because our philosophy and the way that we're behaving. We need to change the way that we're looking for our people, our representatives, that we need to, I don't like, I go over there to say and select somebody because I know him, because he is my colleague in college, because he is my neighbors, because he's one of my family. No, I need to go over there to vote because he has the skills, because he has the knowledge, because I know over there he can make the job done. That we need to do it from now on, when we go over there and gather as a Democrat and to select anybody. Sorry, I take more than my time.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your grace on my faux pas. And it seems like we got into that question there. And Janice, what I'm going to do is start the next question with you. And let's just, as long as we're on this roll, and thank you, Imad, for answering that, let's go to Zach, Janice, and then down to Eric.
So we are answering the question about reaching out to Republican
the question is,
senators.
how would you reach
Okay,
out to
just
fellow
making-
senators who are
Yep.
from more conservative districts and get their votes?
There have been several bills passed in this legislative session that have been bipartisan. Last week's comprehensive needs reform bill for the mental health system is an example of one of those. And there are, frankly, quite a few bills that are passed with pretty wide bipartisan majorities. The most controversial bills, however, the most important fights, have largely been partisan votes. Once Republicans got full control of the legislature after the 2016 election, they pushed through this radical agenda that was an attack on healthcare, an attack on education, an attack on workers' rights. And so it's important that Democrats actually win these elections, that we were able to succeed at the ballot box. For these most important issues, we're not going to get a whole lot of Republican votes to restore collective bargaining rights. We're only going to do that if we're able to elect a Democratic governor, elect a Democratic House, and fight back to either a majority or an outright fight back to a majority in the Iowa Senate. And so I think it's actually very important. Of course, we will continue to work with Republicans on issues that are nonpartisan, and there are some of those. But the most important fights facing our state right now, there is a very clear distinction between where the Republicans are and where the Democrats. The Democrats are on your side, and the Republicans are not.
Janice?
I believe there are actually a broader range of issues on which we can agree. In addition to the complex needs mental health bill and a bill that was at least half a loaf toward starting to attack the opioid crisis, which is something else we haven't mentioned, they also agreed on a key school issue that will help particularly the rural areas, and that is a plus-up for transportation funding, because the rural schools, especially the consolidated districts, are working with enormous transportation costs, much greater than we experience in urban districts. I think there are other issues on which we can find common cause, and they may be wedge issues, they may be small issues, and you're not going to get a big complex needs mental health bill, but you may get a transportation plus-up or a piece of health care initially, because reality is that we're unlikely to take the Senate back this year. We have a good chance to take the House, and we have a good chance to take the governor's mansion. And that means that we're going to have to continue to work more effectively across the aisle, and I believe that when the houses are split, that there will be more opportunity to do that, because in order for either party to succeed, they will have to compromise.
Eric?
As legislators, we have to work together with other legislators across the state. That's just part of our job. That's what the legislature does. And it requires the ability to stand firm in our convictions and stand up for what we believe in, and also to be able to listen. And it's hard on a broad scale on some of these big policy positions to imagine this compromise. But I would just like to point back. So 1986, President Reagan, we passed this giant tax reform. And you say what you will about it. I mean, I know we can all have our own opinions. But this lasted 53 months, and it had bipartisan buy-in. That's how we set up something to at least see progress. This newest federal tax bill that we saw was done under the dark of night by only Republicans. No Democrats signed off on it, and there was no bipartisan effort. And now what we're seeing is these tax cuts failing. Same thing at the state level. What we're seeing right now with our legislature is we're seeing this Republican-controlled legislature working on a new tax reform bill under the dark of night. All they're doing is ignoring other dissenting voices and not putting the work together to actually produce something that's going to better Iowans. We all share a common goal of bettering Iowa. It's just a matter of making sure that when we focus on these issues, that we actually work in a bipartisan way to actually make them work with taxes, with healthcare. Healthcare, we can say the exact same thing.
All right, let's move to the next question. And there are a couple of questions here that really boil down to what can the state do to improve services to seniors. Janice, let's start with you, please.
One of the things the state can do to improve services to seniors is to actually fund what already exists. The Department of Aging their staff has been cut back by at least 40%. The ombudsman, the long-term care ombudsman that is supposed to have people travel regularly to inspect nursing homes on a random basis, in addition to dealing with specific requests, has not been able to travel because not only has their staff been cut, because their budget has been cut, but their travel money, they have decided that the one area that they would cut is their travel money. So they're trying to do some of this by teleconference. And our governor said, well, you're just going to have to get used to it because that's the wave of the future. I disagree. elderly people who have who would like to report or have family members who want to report something need to be able to talk to people in person and develop a relationship of confidence. They're not going to do that, especially at that age and stage, via teleconference. It is too important, and you can't really tell what's going on in a place simply by talking to someone by teleconference.
Eric.
We need to try to keep our aging Iowans at home for as long as we possibly can. That should be the absolute focus. So I'm fortunate enough to have 3 of my 4 grandparents still alive, all around the age of 90. 2 live independently for the most part, with some limited in-home care, and my other grandparent lives with my parents. Having the opportunity to talk with my grandma about these issues and making sure that we're addressing transportation and accessibility, 2 primary concerns for aging Iowans, making sure we're addressing, like Janice said, making sure that those who are in long-term care, we have the proper oversight and are funding the ombuds persons to be able to come in and check up and make sure that everything's being run appropriately. And also, a lot of this has to do with Medicaid. 1 in 7 aging Iowans rely on Medicaid to pick up where Medicare falls out, and so we have to is not enough. So we have to make sure that Medicaid is being properly run. That means publicly running our Medicaid system. That means the MCOs need to go. It means fixing Medicaid will provide lower costs and higher quality health care. And that's all part of the same thing, because fixed incomes for aging adults don't fluctuate as healthcare costs continue to rise and costs of living continue to rise.
Imad.
Well, I see all the Asian people in Iowa, they deserve to be treated and treated well, and either to stay in facilities or they staying at homes. They need to get the service. Either people, they coming to their home and provide the service, and also if they're going to a hospital, they need to be accepted and be treated well. Besides, I would like, that for the aging, I have 2 issues, that people, they are capable and able to work and doing their daily activities. And these people, they need to have centers for the socials, for the training, to upgrade their skills. And also, we need to open doors for them if they are capable to work. Why not? They need to be work. They need to be involved. They need to be part of the communities, because aging people, they have the experience, they have the knowledge. We need to get to them, and we need to get all their knowledge, their experience during their whole lives, and we need to benefit from them. We don't need just to put them out and say because they are old. No, they are not old. We need to involve with them. My time is over.
Excuse me. Yeah, Zach. Thank you.
I would echo a lot of what we've already heard. I think reversing Medicaid privatization has to be a priority. I think that we've already talked briefly about the provider shortage for our senior population. I don't think we talk as much about the shortage of home health aides. Keeping people in their homes as long as possible is very important. My girlfriend's grandmother turns 104 next month, and she's still in her apartment out on Long Island. So I've seen the difference that makes for her and how rewarding that is to be able to stay in her home. I saw something somewhat remarkable just over the weekend when we were preparing for the forum today. The Iowa Department of Aging is now requesting for volunteer ombudsmen to be participants and volunteers for the state to try and keep people accountable and to help prevent abuse. I actually couldn't believe it when I saw it. I had to make sure it wasn't like a belated April Fool's joke. It's not, and unfortunately, that's the state that we're in. I think it's critical that we reverse these funding cuts for senior services. I've had the chance to visit Tipton Senior Dining, Solon Senior Dining. I've seen how much of a difference these programs can make and the difference that they can make for the lives of seniors. So we should be funding these programs that work, not cutting their budgets.
We do have some other questions related to just an aging-related question, and this one talks about the fact that the proportion of our workforce in Iowa, 65 and older, is larger than the proportion of our replacement workforce of 18 to 24-year-olds. In other words, we're getting really at some of the brain drain issues, the replacement of workers in this state to keep it a vibrant state. What would your approach be to this? What's the state's solution to having enough young people here to continue and replace the older workers? Eric, you get to go first.
Well, so I guess so just so I'm clear, you're asking how can we continue to encourage young people to stay and begin careers in
Yes.
Iowa?
In Grow, Iowa, yes.
And grow Iowa. Well, that's what I intend to do. That's why I'm here. My family's here. I have roots here. I'm invested. I want to grow a family here, and that's why I'm sitting at this table, because I want to fight to make sure that Iowa's a good place for me to raise my family. And we do that by making sure we are providing opportunities for good work. So we need to make sure we're bringing in jobs so young professionals have the ability to begin their careers here. We also need to make sure that we have a clean environment. I cannot stress this enough. When you look at what different businesses are looking for when they're coming in, the type of businesses we want to attract to our state, they care about a clean environment. And so when you talk to younger populations, what are their concerns? It's diversity. It's inclusion, it's equality, it's environment. It's making sure that this is a place that they are proud of. And I'm proud of Iowa, and I want to continue to lead and push Iowa to continue to be a leader. And we do this by making sure that it's an attractive place for those who go through the public school system, graduate from our fantastic public universities, make sure that they set up shop here and begin their careers here.
Imad?
I believe education. If you need to build a new generation to work, we need to give them best educations. We need to train them well, either to go to the normal and traditional school systems to get graduated and to go to university or to go to the college, or we need to have training and upgrade facilities, centers, that to upgrade their skills. Besides, we need to bring to Iowa high demand jobs, high technical jobs. We don't need to open grocery stores. We don't need to open much of what we have. We need to have factories that for the computers, assembly or manufacturing. We need to have a factory for the televisions. We need that the way that we can upgrade their skills. Sorry.
Zach?
Well, one of the reasons why folks who are age 65 and older are making up a greater percentage of our workforce than 18 to 24 is because we have a lot more 18 to 24-year-olds going to college and getting either their undergraduate or graduate degree. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. We also have a growing population that is simply, we have more older folks than we do younger folks. And so there are a couple of things there. But specifically to the brain drain point, I do agree that making these investments in education is exceptionally important. And also making sure that we're willing to stand up for Republicans who are trying to pass things like the 20-week abortion ban or the fetal heartbeat bill. I cannot tell you, I have classmates who left Iowa for college or for their first jobs. The prospect of moving back to a state that bans abortion after 6 weeks, for a lot of my female classmates from West High School is something that it just makes them shudder, something that they would not be willing to do if that law actually goes into effect. So there are a lot of things that we have to do if we actually want to bring more Iowans home after they've left the state. And I remember very clearly when I graduated high school reading in the Press Citizen back when it was actually a proper newspaper, an editorial saying, go out, explore the world, and then come home. Sorry, Will. But the reality is that Republicans are putting our state on a trajectory where a lot of Iowans who leave the state are not going to want to come home after they're done with school or their first job.
Janice?
I fought for women and children abroad so many times, and I could not believe that when I brought my younger daughter back home to finish her education here, because we did come back here in part because of the schools, that I was witnessing this happen in Iowa, the type of things that you're talking about. I thought abroad, okay, but here? So yes, we need to work very hard on that. Education is really the key, but not just education. We need the high schools, we need vocational education in the high schools so that we can really push kids into those areas as well. We need the community colleges to be the engines of creating qualified workers for the jobs that exist. We also need something that the federal level really only can help us with, and that is a more open immigration system, because we as a state have often benefited from immigrants who have become tremendous parts of the community. I saw the 15 and it just sort of cut off my thought, so.
That's that high-tech technology.
Yep.
Eric, we started with you on that one, so I want to go on with this. If elected, And this is one more on this thread before we move on. If elected, what organizations will you look to for guidance on aging and disability-related issues? Imad, you get to start that. If elected, what organizations will you look to for guidance on aging and disability-related issues?
Vocational rehab. The Iowa Vocational Rehab, I believe they did a good job, and they take care and with people, all the people they have challenges, and they have programs, they have trainings, they have resources that they can provide it to the people that they have challenges, and I believe this is the good area. And if I am elected, I will contact them, and I'm going to support them, and I will try to provide every and each source that I can for them, because I believe the way that they acting, the way that they performing their jobs, and I believe it's phenomenal. I believe it is outstanding, and this is the. And also, I encourage everybody that have any challenge or any difficulties, they need to contact them. If they cannot help him, they can give him the resources and put him in the right track for the people they can help him.
Zach.
In getting ready for this forum, we, my team and I had conversations with a number of local activists, and reached out to several organizations. I know the Iowa AARP had a column in the Gazette recently about the 2018 CARE Act. Clearly, we would definitely depend on the task force to continue to provide insight into what's happening here at the county level. And I do know that Johnson County recently added an aging specialist, so I think it's very important that we're willing to work with the people who are, paid professionals and who are working on these issues around the clock. And I also want to make sure that we're going to be talking with the various people who represent kind of these interdisciplinary communities. I see Harry Olmsted here in the audience, and I know that he's been a tireless advocate. He's rolling his eyes at me, but we're very thankful for all that you do, Harry. So I'll definitely be looking to try and draw on guidance from organizations, from paid professionals with the county and with the other kind of governments and municipalities, as well as individual advocates who are here in our community.
Janice.
I think we start local and grow. We start with some of the people who are administering and working in many of these communities. We start with the Johnson County Livable Community effort, which also includes the new aging specialist, which I think is a tremendous resource, so that someone who doesn't know where to go can come in and see and ask the questions and get all the information. We go to the 6 regions that should be properly funded under the state, including the one in Cedar Rapids, the Heritage Agency, that can also provide similar resources for a variety of people who are facing challenges. Because what I can't imagine is an event happens, you're under stress, you know something has to happen, and you have no idea where to look for the resources. So what I ask myself is, what is my point of contact? And that point of contact right now would be either Jeff Kelbach with Johnson County, or it would be the Heritage Agency up in Cedar Rapids. And those would, I believe, be good starts to work with.
Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on a lot of good places to start. The places that I guess I would add is just really focusing also on just realizing how Iowa government is set up with the DHS and the role that DHS plays in all of this. And so DHS brings in a lot of quality advocates and brings in a lot of different voices. A lot of the problems we end up with is that the DHS is just not acting based on those voices. So we have to make sure that we are working with the DHS to make sure that the proper representation and the voices are being heard, and we're actually taking actions based on the reports from across the state. So the DHS is one, is the agency that would be doing a lot of work with. I also think it, again, is important to note that our universities, we have incredible public policy professionals here who do tremendous research and consider what it takes to for transportation on different mechanisms on way we can provide transportation to aging adults, because that's one of the most necessities for individuals who are at home, that the transportation is incredibly important. So we have a lot of public health professionals here at the university doing quality research, and a lot of this is just the ability to listen. We need to make sure that we're listening to these advocates who do such incredible work, like the Task Force on Aging.
From our audience, what action, and this is our last question because we're coming down on our time here, but what action of the General Assembly, either this year or last, did you most disagree with? Zach,
The gutting of collective bargaining rights for state workers.
explain.
Look, the reality is that our government depends on state workers to deliver these vital services that we've just spent the last 70 minutes or so here talking about. My campaign is being co-chaired by my U.S. history teacher, Mitch Gross, and his wife, Melanie. Mitch is somebody who's very important in my life. He taught me a lot of what I know about American history, and I think it's exceptionally important that we protect the ability of teachers and all of our state workers to bargain collectively. And I don't think there's any single issue that is more important facing workers right now, especially state workers, than restoring full collective bargaining rights and making sure that it's easier for workers to organize, not harder.
Janice?
Well, since you took that, I will move to voter suppression and the voter ID law, because no matter how it's framed, the law that was passed last year, the intent of it is clear. It intends to reduce the ability of certain populations to vote. It's harder for some people who don't have IDs, people who live far and may not be able to get IDs, people who may not be able to find their little card or leave it at home, people who just don't understand it particularly well. There is no good reason in Iowa to have a voter ID law. It's a lie that's been perpetrated that there's voter fraud. There simply is virtually none. And now they are talking about also passing a law that would overlap into the union area. They were talking about in committee this past Friday a law that would potentially go further than the gutting of Chapter 20 last year, which would actually impose the same sort of special ID requirement on union members in order to vote in their union recertification.
Eric?
The lack of, there's so many. So first of all, yes and yes. In addition, the failure to fund our environmental trust fund. So we had this world-class water quality bill that passed this term, which is absurd because we have a funding source that that legislators passed in 2009 and 2010. We as voters voted to approve it in 2011, and yet we have still not funded this fund that's supposed to be meant to go towards water quality. So the failure is with water quality, and the failure is to actually get this fund established and start bringing in money. We have so much to do when it comes to water quality in our state, so much. And to think that this piece of legislation we passed this term was anything more than a drop, not even a drop in the bucket, is just so frustrating to me because we voted on this. We are 20 years behind on this water quality conversation, and we're seeing the nitrates, we're seeing erosion from our cropland, we're seeing nitrate pollution in our waterways. The Mississippi River is disgusting. It flows into the Gulf of Mexico, and there's this huge dead zone where nothing can live. And we're responsible for that. So it's not just like a farmer problem or us problem. This is everyone's problem. And we waited 8 years to start doing something towards it, and we still haven't funded this trust fund. It's so easy. Like, this is a first day thing. I don't know why it hasn't passed.
It's called time. Okay, thank you. Imad.
I agree with all sort of my colleagues, but the only thing that is just I'm focusing on, when they passed the bill of SF 481, I believe the term most of the people that the government, they give the ICE, they give the local police department to act as ICE, and if they arrest anybody, they need to ask him about his legal status, and that is unacceptable because. You know that we're mixing everything, you know that, and we're talking about the Constitution, we're talking about the human rights, we're talking about the people rights. You know that you're taking people rights, you know that. Why the police officer, you know, how we can make sure the police officer did not abuse what the authority that they put it in their hands. This is unacceptable, and I need to reform that. If I go over there, I'm going to fight it this is not my issue. This is all of us, because you know that if they hit one area, they're going to hit another area. But we need our voices to be heard. If we just shut up and let them do whatever they do, then they can do whatever they want, and we need to accept it.
Okay, thank you. That kind of concludes our questions because we're nearing the end of our 90 minutes. I do want to at least let the candidates know that there were a few other questions that we didn't get to, and there were some comments as well. We only, and thank you for them, but of concern of the voters here or the people here, Iowa water quality, the anti-protest bill, an anti-protest bill that would be troublesome for some. Mental illness still is an issue for people, as is support for continuing education for teachers. So at least I wanted to let you know that that is on the minds of people here. I'm sorry we didn't get to those questions. These 4 candidates are the only candidates in the primary election. There will be a general election in November. There is one other candidate, Carl Krambeck. He's from Clarence. He's a libertarian, but he is not in a primary challenge. We're going to give each of you 2 minutes now to talk about things you felt you didn't get a chance to talk about or points you wanted to make. And we're going to go in the reverse order that we started, which means, Janice, you get to go first, and then we'll come down to the table to Eric, to you at the conclusion. So, Janice, you have a couple of minutes to tell us what about the things that we didn't touch on that you felt were necessary for this forum.
Thanks, Lyle, and thanks to you and to Bob Welsh for keeping us in the loop and for organizing this. This is really a wide field, and there are so many issues we could have touched on. I think there's an overall trend that I really want to see reversed, which is spending less on taking care of our people. We need to change our budget priorities. How would you feel, for example, if you called the long-term ombudsman and just got a phone message that says, let's see, we are unavailable to take your call at this time. Please leave your name, phone number, and a brief message, and we will return your call in 3 business days. This is when there's an issue at a nursing home. These are serious issues for older Americans and older Iowans. There are 2 particular proposals that I just wanted to have a chance to mention. One of them is, and they both revolve around caregivers, because the caregiver shortage is the tsunami that's coming. We have a shortage now. It's only going to get worse if we don't really focus on it. There's an NGO in Des Moines that really focuses on this, but there are a couple of programs that we could put in place that might help. One is more at the federal level. If there were the possibility of putting a caregiver visa program in place, it could be enormously helpful. Canada has one. It works really well. They bring in qualified people. They're largely people who are trained in nursing. They work for at least 2 years as either child care or elder care in the home, and then they get the right to the Canadian equivalent of green card status and eventually to citizenship. It's enriched that country. We can do it here too, but it would take our working with the federal level. The other program that I'd like to throw out is called Adult Family Homes. They exist in several states here, and my mother spent 4.5 years in one in Washington State. People decide they want to open their home and refit it to accommodate up to 4 to 6 elderly people. They get training, they are regulated, but the people live in a family, they have a fair amount of independence, and it is a wonderful model that we ought to be able to have here in Iowa too.
Thank you. Zach.
I'm so glad to have been here this afternoon and to be alongside such a great group of fellow Democrats. I appreciate the chance to discuss the issues facing our community and some of the solutions to problems that we're facing. This afternoon, you've all heard the perspectives from us on a lot of these challenges, and it's clear that we do have quite a bit in common and that I think we can all agree that there is a lot of work to do. I'm asking for your vote because I believe that I have a proven track record of doing the work and of bringing people together. I don't back down from tough fights, and I'm willing to speak truth to power. And I've never, ever done it alone. With your help, we can make sure that our community continues to have a strong champion who is going to fight for all of our citizens, because we can't win these fights alone. I believe that our community needs a senator who will continue to support Democrats across southeastern Iowa, and I know that I can be that leader because I've already done it. As an advocate with our state's LGBTQ rights organization, One Iowa, I help to protect marriage equality in this state. Then I help to fight to succeed and win an end to discrimination in the Boy Scouts of America. For the campaign with One Iowa, we went all over our state. We had tough conversations. And winning back the future of Iowa is going to start with tough conversations with friends, with family, and with the public like we've just done today. It starts with the renewed commitment to fighting for all of our citizens, including our senior citizens. I'm running for this seat because I will never forget how it feels to be excluded or how hard my family had to work to get a seat at the table. And I'm running for this seat to be your next day senator, to fight for your family the same way that I fought for mine. It's been a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm excited for more of these conversations. Thank you.
Imad.
First, I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here this afternoon and for sharing my views and listening to me. And I would like to assure you, if I get elected, I would be the right person because I'm a fighter, I'm educator, I'm a researcher, and I work with many years. And I have 5 kids, and all of them is well educated. And one of them's like Eric, you know that he has a PhD in accounting, and he's 27 years old. And I believe in education, and I believe the education is the bridge that they can change people's lives. Education, they can eliminate the young fellows' crimes. We can put programs, and I'm going to work seriously for that, especially for the young African Americans. I would like them, you know, that to have special programs that to gather them together and upgrade their skills and let them focus in schools, in academics. And they need to change their behavior and mentality to believe without education, they were not going to have decent life. If you need to be respected inside the community, inside your groups, you need to be educated. That's going to open a lot of doors for you and a lot of doors for your family in the futures. And I would like for the citizens, you know, that to be more involved and to have their centers, you know, that to be socialized, and if they are capable and able to work, to give them, you know, that whatever they need for trainings and tools, you know, that to put. And also I need I'm going to fight for them, you know, that for the employers, you know, that to give them more chances and to give them chances to go over there to work. And also I need to fight, you know, economic growth and social growth, they're going hand to hand. Without, I would like to increase the minimum wages for Iowans for $15 an hour.
Call time. Call time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Eric.
My campaign's motto is let Iowans lead. That means we should be, as a state, we should be leaders nationally, and it starts by leading locally. Our state has a strong tradition of being a leader. Our universities are nationally, if not internationally, recognized. The law school was the first law school in the country to admit an African-American law student, and the first one in the country to admit a female law student. We also lead the way with renewable energy. We have a strong wind energy presence in our state. We also were at the forefront when our Varnum decision came down in 2008 supporting marriage equality. Those are examples of Iowa being leaders. Unfortunately, it seems like in recent years, we've been looking at the states around us and kind of like picking all the rotten ideas and claiming them as our own. We're seeing union busting, the stops in investing in public education, and the list can just continue on and on. And with the Trump administration doing what they're doing, it's more vital than ever that we as a state stand firm to our convictions and lead the way in creating a state that is inclusive and values equality and is a good place to raise your family and live out your years as an Iowan. And we do this in 3 ways. We do this by fixing our budget. First, that means get rid of all these corporate tax cuts that are draining our state, or that are completely taking away the funds from our state. We need to be investing that here, not out of state. Second, we need to be growing our economy. We do that by making sure that this is a place that's inclusive, diverse, making sure it's a place that has a clean environment, making sure companies that want to come here will come here. This isn't a race to the bottom for budget cuts to attract companies. We should be showing what we can offer as a state. And so fixing our budgets first. Second, healthcare. MCOs have got to go. We need to make sure that our Medicaid system is appropriately run. And then third, we need to support our communities. We need to support our communities by making sure, supporting all of our communities. That means criminal justice reform. That means supporting aging populations. That means supporting disenfranchised groups. That means raising the minimum wage. It's all of the above. I'm running because I want to let Iowans lead. Me and my team of volunteers fight every day because this is a message that I believe in, and this is a message that we are fighting for. So I hope you consider me as a candidate because I want to fight for your voice, and I want to make sure that we let Iowans lead. Thank you.
Let me, on behalf, thank the four of you for being willing to put your name forth to serve not only the people in District 37, but people of the whole state. If you in the audience think there's somebody here that you really want to see elected, they have not asked me to say this, but they could sure use your support. They'd be happy to accept your donations. They'd be happy to have you volunteer to make contacts on their behalf. So, seriously consider that. I want to, on behalf of all of you, Lyle, thank you very much for agreeing to moderate this group, and thank the four of you for, and we do have a number of people from the press. Press Citizen is live streaming this. I know that there's a member of the Gazette here. And let me say, in terms of chuckling, Katie Bronsbill has been very responsive to our forums and publicity, and I personally appreciate that very, very much. Let me also share with you that these candidates are going to be together again at least on Wednesday, April the 27th. That's a Wednesday.
25th. Isn't it?
The 25th.
Yeah, Wednesday, April 25th.
Wednesday, April 25th at 7 p.m. Or is it 6:30?
6:30 p.m.
Oh, gosh.
6:30. That's what I had, was 6:30.
Okay, all right.
So please do not discount the importance of this election. As Lyle pointed out in his opinion article in the Press Citizen, this becomes important because chances are these people are not going to have the opportunity to run again for this position, at least for some time, because the person who's elected probably is going to seek re-election. So, carefully consider who you want to represent us. Let me tell you that on the Johnson County Task Force on Aging next month, which is May 14th at 2 o'clock, there will be a meeting, candidates forum for the Johnson County Board of Supervisors. And there are 3 candidates there for 2 elections, for seats. And if you don't think being elected to the Johnson County Board of Supervisors is not important, boy, please talk to me afterwards. I will convince you of all the power that those 5 people have. Again, thank you, candidates, and thank each of you for attending.